6 months after the unauthorized operation that had redefined her military career, Specialist Fiona Jackson stood in the same briefing room where she had once been systematically excluded from meaningful operations. But everything had changed. The tactical reconnaissance patch on her shoulder carried authority that her logistics insignia never had. And when she spoke during mission planning sessions, senior officers listened with attention that reflected hard-earned respect. The infiltration route through Sector 12 is challenging but manageable, she told the assembled Special Operations team, pointing to topographical displays that had become her professional domain. Key terrain features provide concealment opportunities. Here and here, but enemy observation posts will require neutralization before main force movement. Major Larson, now her direct supervisor rather than dismissive administrator, nodded approvingly. Timeline for route clearance, Jackson? 90 minutes to reach overwatch positions, 30 minutes to neutralize observation posts, 15 minutes to signal all clear for main force movement, Fiona replied, her tactical expertise reflecting months of specialized training that had followed her unauthorized success. Weather conditions are optimal, and intelligence indicates enemy forces haven't adjusted their defensive posture since last reconnaissance. The transformation had begun immediately after her extraction from the Croatian operation. The tactical debriefing that had been intended as disciplinary review became recognition ceremony as command personnel struggled to reconcile unauthorized success with institutional procedures that weren't designed to accommodate individual initiative. Of such magnitude, Colonel Richards had conducted the formal review, with careful attention to both tactical achievement and procedural violations. Jackson, your actions prevented strategic disaster and saved multiple friendly casualties. But you also violated direct orders and conducted operations outside your authorized role. The solution had been immediate reassignment to specialized reconnaissance operations where her comprehensive preparation was officially valued rather than systematically discouraged. The skills that had been dismissed as inappropriate ambition became essential qualifications for missions that required exactly the capabilities she had developed through unauthorized channels. Her training pipeline had been accelerated to provide official recognition for abilities she had already demonstrated under combat conditions. Advanced marksmanship, tactical reconnaissance, close-quarters combat, and specialized infiltration techniques became formal qualifications rather than unauthorized preparation. The irony wasn't lost on Fiona that the same comprehensive approach that had been criticized as excessive was now encouraged as professional development. Her systematic preparation was reframed as essential capability rather than inappropriate curiosity, and her additional training was officially supported rather than administratively discouraged. Lieutenant Morrison, now serving as intelligence coordinator for joint operations, had become one of Fiona's strongest professional advocates. Your tactical analysis capabilities exceed those of personnel with significantly more experience, Morrison had said during a recent performance evaluation. Your combination of field skills and analytical thinking provides exactly what complex operations require. The missions that followed her reassignment tested every aspect of the comprehensive preparation that had once been dismissed as problematic. Deep reconnaissance operations that required individual initiative far from conventional support. Tactical coordination with allied special forces that demanded language skills and cultural knowledge. Precision operations that combined marksmanship with tactical thinking under extreme pressure. Each successful mission validated her approach while demonstrating that comprehensive preparation was essential, rather than excessive for complex operational environments. The systematic training that had been criticized as inappropriate had proved perfect preparation for challenges that conventional specialization couldn't address effectively. Her relationship with fellow soldiers had evolved from isolation to integration as her tactical success created respect that transcended previous dismissals. Soldiers who had once whispered about her excessive preparation now sought her advice about their own professional development, understanding that comprehensive readiness created opportunities that narrow specialization missed. Captain Weber, whose rescue operation she had enabled through unauthorized action, had become both colleague and friend. "You changed how this entire unit thinks about individual capability and professional development," he had said during a recent conversation. People stopped accepting limitations and started pushing their own boundaries. The institutional changes extended beyond individual recognition. Training protocols were modified to encourage comprehensive preparation rather than narrow specialization. Role definitions were expanded to accommodate individual initiative that exceeded traditional boundaries. Professional development programs were enhanced to support systematic skill building that transcended assigned specialties. Today's mission briefing represented the culmination of her professional transformation. As team leader for a complex infiltration operation, Fiona was coordinating elements that included personnel from multiple specialties, allied forces from 3 different countries, and tactical objectives that would have been considered impossible for individual soldiers just months earlier. "Final equipment check at 1900 hours, she announced, concluding the briefing with authority that reflected proven capability rather than administrative assignment. "Mission launch at 2000 hours. Remember, we go in together, we work together. We come out together, no one gets left behind." The responses carried respect that had been earned through performance rather than granted through hierarchy. Her transformation from overlooked logistics specialist to recognized tactical leader demonstrated that comprehensive preparation could overcome institutional limitations when backed by professional competence and moral courage. As the briefing concluded and team members dispersed to prepare for operations, Fiona reflected on the journey that had brought her to this position. Months of systematic exclusion, official discouragement, and whispered doubts had been overcome through unauthorized action that proved comprehensive preparation was essential rather than excessive, the supply run that was supposed to be routine. Logistics had become the catalyst for career transformation that demonstrated individual potential could exceed institutional expectations. Her refusal to accept limitations that others had tried to impose had created opportunities that redefined professional possibilities for herself and others. Croatian operation that had tested her unauthorized capabilities had become legendary. Within special operations communities, studied as demonstration of what comprehensive preparation could accomplish when conventional approaches proved inadequate. But for Fiona, it represented proof that being ready for opportunities meant refusing to accept other people's definitions of possibility. Her radio crackled with mission updates as team members prepared for deployment. Complex operations that would test every skill she had developed through systematic preparation that was now officially valued rather than administratively discouraged. The transformation was complete, but the mission was just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload. From us. The final enemy position represented the most challenging engagement of Fiona's unauthorized operation, testing every skill she developed through months of comprehensive preparation that her superiors had dismissed as inappropriate ambition. The hostile command post was positioned in terrain that provided natural defensive advantages while coordinating the sophisticated ambush that would have devastated conventional rescue forces. At 11:52 hours, Fiona approached the final objective. Using infiltration techniques that combined her father's SAS training with systematic study of local terrain features, the enemy command position was protected by overlapping fields of observation, integrated communication networks, and defensive arrangements that would challenge experienced special operations personnel. but the hostile forces had positioned themselves to counter conventional assault tactics without anticipating threats from comprehensive preparation that exceeded standard military role definitions. Fiona's unauthorized capabilities created tactical opportunities that enemy planners had never considered possible from a logistics specialist. Her approach required marksmanship precision that exceeded standard military qualifications, engaging targets at distances that demanded specialized equipment and training that officially didn't exist in her assigned specialty. The rifle she'd acquired through unofficial channels was configured for exactly this type of precision engagement. Its optics calibrated for conditions that standard logistics personnel would never encounter. The first engagement eliminated the communications specialist coordinating enemy operations across multiple positions. The shot required ballistic calculations that incorporated wind speed, atmospheric pressure, and target movement patterns that Fiona had practiced during months of unauthorized training that others had viewed as excessive preparation. Enemy forces responded with tactical coordination that demonstrated sophisticated military training and equipment that exceeded initial intelligence assessments. Their countermeasures were professional and aggressive, forcing Fiona to utilize close quarters combat skills that logistics specialists weren't supposed to possess, but that her comprehensive preparation had specifically addressed. The engagement that followed tested every aspect of her unauthorized training. Movement techniques that enabled tactical advantage in broken terrain. Marksmanship skills that provided precision engagement under extreme stress. Tactical thinking that adapted to fluid situations where conventional doctrine provided inadequate guidance. At 12:07 hours, Fiona eliminated the forward observer who was directing artillery support for enemy defensive operations. The engagement required simultaneous coordination of movement, observation, and precision shooting that exceeded the capabilities that her assigned role was supposed to provide. Her tactical communications equipment detected increasing confusion among hostile forces who couldn't understand how their carefully planned defensive positions were being systematically compromised by threats they hadn't anticipated. Their radio chatter revealed growing awareness that their ambush was failing despite tactical advantages that should have guaranteed success. The final engagement occurred at 12:19 hours, when Fiona neutralized the enemy commander who was attempting to coordinate withdrawal operations. The shot required marksmanship skills that combined technical precision with tactical judgment, eliminating key leadership, while creating opportunities for conventional forces to secure the area with minimal resistance. Her systematic approach had disrupted enemy coordination, eliminated key personnel, and neutralized defensive advantages that would have made conventional rescue operations catastrophically expensive. The hostile forces that had been positioned to ambush Captain Weber's team were now disorganized, leaderless, and vulnerable to standard military tactics. But Fiona's unauthorized actions had also created tactical situations that exceeded her individual capabilities. Remaining enemy forces were responding with increasing desperation, their disciplined withdrawal operations degenerating into aggressive attempts to locate and eliminate the threat that was systematically destroying their defensive coordination. Her position was becoming untenable as hostile forces concentrated their remaining capabilities on identifying her location and eliminating her individual threat. The comprehensive preparation that had enabled her initial success was being tested by sustained enemy pressure that exceeded what individual soldiers could normally withstand. At 12:34 hours, Fiona's tactical situation became critical as enemy forces closed on her position using coordination techniques that demonstrated professional military capabilities. Her ammunition was running low, her concealment options were decreasing, and her communication equipment was detecting hostile radio traffic that indicated systematic search operations. The moment that would define her entire military career arrived when enemy forces established visual contact with her position. The engagement that followed would determine whether her months of comprehensive preparation had equipped her with capabilities sufficient to survive sustained combat against professional military personnel. Her response combined marksmanship, precision with tactical movement that exceeded standard military training. Each shot was calculated to maximize tactical advantage while conserving ammunition that was becoming increasingly precious. Each movement was designed to maintain defensive initiative while creating opportunities for eventual extraction. The critical test wasn't just tactical. It was psychological. Fiona was operating alone, far from conventional support, facing professional enemies who were specifically trained to eliminate threats like the one she represented. Her comprehensive preparation was being tested under conditions that exceeded anything her unauthorized training had specifically addressed. At 12:47 hours, her tactical communications detected friendly radio traffic indicating that Captain Weber's rescue team was approaching the area she'd secured through individual action. The conventional forces that had been threatened by sophisticated enemy ambush were now able to complete their mission because someone had refused to accept limitations that others had tried to impose. But Fiona's individual situation remained critical. Enemy forces were maintaining pressure despite their degraded coordination, and her tactical position was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. The success of her unauthorized operation would be meaningless if she couldn't survive to witness its strategic implications. Her comprehensive preparation was being tested by circumstances that exceeded individual capabilities, regardless of training quality or equipment sophistication. The critical test had become a question of whether systematic preparation could overcome tactical disadvantages that challenged the limits of human performance. The radio crackled with Captain Weber's voice, professional and urgent as rescue operations moved into their final phase. Base Command, we're approaching the objective area. Enemy resistance appears disrupted, but we're detecting ongoing combat operations. Fiona's unauthorized actions had created tactical opportunities that would enable conventional rescue success, but her individual survival would depend on capabilities that exceeded anything her systematic preparation had specifically addressed. The critical test had become ultimate validation of whether comprehensive readiness was sufficient for circumstances that exceeded normal operational parameters. The decision crystallized for Fiona at 1003 hours, when her monitoring equipment detected enemy communications indicating that conventional rescue forces were walking into a carefully prepared ambush. Captain Weber's Bravo team was approaching tactical positions that hostile forces had specifically designed to neutralize, and Base Command was either unable or unwilling to authorize the unconventional actions necessary to prevent catastrophic casualties. Base Command, this is Jackson, she transmitted one final time, her voice carrying the calm certainty of someone who had spent months preparing for exactly this type of moral and tactical crossroads. Enemy forces are repositioning to ambush rescue elements. Conventional approach will result in multiple friendly casualties and mission failure. Major Larson's response reflected institutional inflexibility that prioritized administrative comfort over operational reality. Jackson, maintain position and await extraction. That's a direct order. Do not attempt unauthorized actions. But Fiona's tactical analysis indicated that following orders would result in the deaths of soldiers who trusted command decisions and the capture of intelligence materials that would compromise Allied operations throughout the region. Her comprehensive preparation had equipped her with capabilities to prevent strategic disaster, but using them would require defying direct orders from superior officers. She switched off her radio, knowing that her next actions would constitute insubordination on a scale that could result in court-martial and military imprisonment. But the alternative was watching good soldiers die while enemy forces achieved strategic objectives that her unauthorized intelligence gathering had predicted and her systematic preparation could prevent. The terrain analysis she'd conducted during Months of unofficial study revealed infiltration routes that enemy defensive planning hadn't anticipated. Their positions were designed to counter conventional approaches using roads and obvious cover. But Fiona's comprehensive preparation had identified alternative paths through terrain that most military personnel would consider impassable. Her personal equipment, carefully acquired through unofficial channels and concealed among legitimate supplies, was specifically configured for independent operations that exceeded standard logistics capabilities. The precision rifle with specialized optics, the communications gear modified for tactical frequencies, the infiltration equipment that enabled silent movement through hostile territory. Fiona began her approach at 10:15 hours, moving through broken terrain that her systematic study had mapped with precision that exceeded official reconnaissance. Every rock formation, every concealment opportunity, every potential firing position had been analyzed and incorporated into tactical plans that officially didn't exist. The enemy position she was approaching represented sophisticated military engineering designed to counter conventional assault tactics. Prepared fighting positions with integrated fields of fire, communication networks that enabled coordinated response, and defensive arrangements that would challenge experienced infantry units. But the hostile forces had made one critical error in their planning. They had positioned themselves to counter conventional military responses without anticipating threats from comprehensive preparation that exceeded standard role definitions. Fiona's unauthorized capabilities created tactical opportunities that enemy planners couldn't have predicted. Her infiltration training, developed through systematic study that her superiors had dismissed as inappropriate curiosity, enabled movement through terrain that conventional military doctrine considered impassable. Her marksmanship skills, maintained through private practice that others had viewed as excessive preparation, provided precision engagement capabilities that exceeded those of standard infantry personnel. The first enemy position was neutralized at 10:47 hours with a precision shot that eliminated the communications specialist coordinating defensive operations. The engagement was silent, using specialized ammunition that minimized acoustic signature while maximizing tactical effectiveness. Fiona's movement between positions utilized techniques that combined her father's SAS training with systematic study of terrain features that she'd conducted during months of preparation that others had characterized as obsessive. Each transition was calculated to avoid detection while maintaining tactical advantage over enemy forces who weren't prepared for threats from unexpected directions. The second position fell 15 minutes later when Fiona eliminated the forward observer who was coordinating artillery support for defensive operations. The engagement required marksmanship skills that exceeded standard military qualifications, precision shooting under stress conditions that her unauthorized training had specifically addressed. Her tactical communications equipment, modified beyond standard specifications through careful acquisition of specialized components, enabled monitoring of enemy frequencies that revealed growing confusion among hostile forces who couldn't understand how their prepared positions were being systematically compromised. The third engagement required close-quarters combat skills that logistics specialists weren't supposed to possess, but that Fiona had developed through comprehensive training that command had tried to restrict. The enemy position was eliminated using techniques that combined stealth, precision, and tactical knowledge that exceeded official qualifications for her assigned role. By 11:34 hours, Fiona had neutralized key elements of enemy defensive coordination, while remaining undetected by the majority of hostile forces. Her systematic approach had disrupted communications, eliminated key personnel, and created tactical opportunities that would enable conventional rescue forces to complete their mission with minimal casualties. The enemy forces that had been positioned to ambush Captain Weber's rescue team were now confused, uncoordinated, and vulnerable to conventional military tactics. Fiona's unauthorized actions had transformed a tactical disaster into a manageable rescue operation, but her radio remained silent. Command frequencies carrying increasingly desperate attempts to coordinate rescue operations that were no longer necessary. Her decision to act independently had prevented strategic catastrophe, but it had also constituted the type of insubordination that military justice systems were designed to punish severely. As she prepared for the final phase of operations that would secure the area for conventional forces, Fiona understood that her military career would be defined by the next few hours. Her comprehensive preparation had proved essential for mission success, but her unauthorized actions had challenged institutional authority in ways that might prove impossible to forgive. The decision had been made. The tactical situation was under control, and conventional rescue forces were approaching an area that was now secure, because someone had refused to accept limitations that others had tried to impose. Time would determine whether her unauthorized actions would be seen as essential initiative or inexcusable insubordination. Fiona's proposal came through the radio at 0947 hours, her voice steady despite the gravity of what she was suggesting. The tactical situation had crystallized into exactly the type of scenario her unauthorized preparation had been designed to address, and conventional response options were proving inadequate to counter enemy sophistication. Base Command, this is Specialist Jackson with tactical assessment and alternative proposal. She transmitted, using formal communication protocols to frame what would essentially be a request to exceed her authorized role by several orders of magnitude. Major Larson's response carried immediate skepticism that reflected months of viewing Fiona's comprehensive preparation as inappropriate ambition rather than valuable capability. Jackson, you're a logistics specialist under enemy threat. Your job is to maintain position and await rescue, not to develop tactical alternatives. But Fiona's unauthorized intelligence gathering had revealed enemy intentions that made conventional rescue attempts counterproductive. Sir, enemy forces aren't positioned for immediate attack. They're waiting for our rescue elements to enter predetermined kill zones. Conventional approach will result in multiple casualties and mission failure. Lieutenant Morrison's voice joined the conversation, her intelligence background allowing her to recognize the sophisticated analysis that Fiona was providing. Jackson, explain your assessment of enemy intentions and capabilities. Fiona consulted her tactical notes, the product of systematic preparation that had been dismissed as excessive, but was proving essential for survival. Sir, hostile forces have studied our response patterns and positioned themselves to counter standard rescue doctrine. They have overwatch positions covering all conventional approaches, integrated fire support, and blocking forces positioned to prevent withdrawal. The intelligence she provided was more comprehensive than official reconnaissance had produced, raising uncomfortable questions about how a logistics specialist had acquired analytical capabilities that exceeded those of trained intelligence personnel. Her months of unauthorized study were suddenly relevant in ways that validated every hour of preparation her superiors had discouraged. Furthermore, Fiona continued, their position suggests this isn't random interdiction. They're specifically targeting today's supply convoy because the cargo includes communications equipment and intelligence materials that would compromise Allied operations if captured. Major Larson consulted with his staff, their hurried conversations, revealing that Fiona's analysis had identified strategic implications that official planning had missed. The supply run that had been characterized as routine was actually critical to regional security, making successful rescue essential rather than merely desirable. Captain Weber's voice crackled through the radio from his approaching position. Base Command were encountering exactly the defensive positions that Jackson described. Enemy has prepared fields of fire that will make conventional approach extremely costly. The confirmation of Fiona's tactical analysis created a command dilemma that reflected institutional resistance to unconventional solutions. Her comprehensive preparation had equipped her with capabilities that were needed for mission success, but authorizing their use would validate the very activities that command had been trying to restrict. "Sir," Fiona said quietly, "I have infiltration training that isn't reflected in my official specialty. I can approach enemy positions using routes they haven't anticipated and neutralize their defensive advantage before conventional forces arrive." The proposal was carefully phrased to avoid mentioning the extent of her unauthorized training or the specialized equipment she'd acquired through unofficial channels. But the implications were clear. She was requesting permission to conduct operations that were far beyond her assigned role and official qualifications. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes joined the command discussion, her operational experience allowing her to recognize both the potential and the risks of Fiona's proposal. "Jackson, explain your infiltration capabilities and specific tactical plan." Fiona had prepared for this moment during months of systematic training that others had viewed as inappropriate ambition. "Sir, I can approach enemy positions from terrain that their defensive planning hasn't covered, neutralize key personnel and equipment to disrupt their coordination, create opportunities for conventional forces to complete rescue operations with minimal casualties." The plan she outlined was tactically sound, but required skills that logistics specialists weren't supposed to possess. Her comprehensive preparation had equipped her with infiltration techniques, marksmanship capabilities, and tactical knowledge that exceeded the qualifications of many infantry personnel. Major Larson's response reflected institutional caution that prioritized administrative comfort over operational necessity. "Jackson, you're not qualified for independent combat operations. Your proposal exceeds your training, your authorization, and your assigned role." But Captain Weber's tactical assessment supported Fiona's analysis while highlighting the limitations of conventional alternatives. "Sir, enemy positions make standard approach extremely difficult. We're looking at significant casualties, even with optimal execution." The command discussion continued for several minutes, balancing operational requirements against institutional procedures that weren't designed for situations where unofficial preparation provided essential capabilities. Fiona's comprehensive training was suddenly valuable, but acknowledging its worth would require admitting that months of administrative discouragement had been counterproductive. Lieutenant Morrison provided the intelligence perspective that supported Fiona's proposal while maintaining plausible deniability about how she'd acquired relevant capabilities. "Sir, Jackson has demonstrated analytical skills that exceed standard logistics training. Her tactical assessment appears accurate based on available intelligence." The endorsement was carefully worded to provide professional support without explicitly acknowledging the unauthorized activities that had developed Fiona's capabilities. But it carried enough weight to influence command decision-making at a critical moment. "Jackson," Major Larson said finally, "your proposal involves significant risks and exceeds your authorized role. Explain why you believe you can accomplish objectives that would challenge trained infantry personnel." Fiona's response was honest within the constraints of operational security. "Sir, I've maintained readiness standards beyond my assigned specialty. I have equipment and training that provides options not available through conventional logistics procedures." The admission was carefully limited, but carried implications that command personnel could interpret according to their operational needs. Fiona's comprehensive preparation was finally being acknowledged as potentially valuable rather than merely inappropriate, but the authorization she needed would require command personnel to trust capabilities they hadn't approved and validate preparation they had actively discouraged. The decision would determine whether her months of systematic training had been justified or whether institutional caution would prevent tactical success. The radio silence that followed carried the weight of institutional decision-making at a moment when conventional wisdom was proving inadequate to address sophisticated threats. Base Command's response to Fiona's intelligence report followed standard military protocols with predictable efficiency and familiar limitations. Within minutes of her transmission, Major Larson had activated conventional rescue procedures that were designed for exactly this type of situation, but failed to account for the sophisticated enemy tactics that Fiona's analysis had revealed. All stations, this is Base Command. Larson's voice carried across multiple frequencies, coordinating a response that demonstrated both military professionalism and institutional blindness. We have a logistics convoy under threat in Sector 7, initiating standard rescue protocols. The first element of conventional response involved air reconnaissance to confirm Fiona's intelligence report. 2 surveillance drones were dispatched to provide real-time imagery of enemy positions. Their sophisticated sensors designed to penetrate camouflage and detect movement that ground-based observation might miss, but the enemy forces had anticipated. Aerial surveillance, positioning themselves in terrain features that provided natural concealment while maintaining tactical advantage over road approaches. The drone imagery confirmed hostile presence without revealing specific capabilities or intentions, providing information that was accurate but inadequate for effective planning. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Hayes, the base operations officer, coordinated ground elements that represented standard military thinking applied to unconventional situations. Prep Bravo team for immediate deployment, she ordered, activating the Quick Reaction Force that was FOB, Meridian's primary response to tactical emergencies. Bravo team consisted of 12 infantry soldiers, equipped for conventional combat operations, supported by armored vehicles that could provide fire superiority and protection during rescue missions. Their training was excellent, their equipment was adequate, and their tactical doctrine was proven effective against conventional threats. Problem was that the enemy forces threatening Fiona weren't conventional. Her intelligence analysis had identified a sophisticated operation that had studied allied response patterns and developed countermeasures specifically designed to neutralize standard military tactics. Captain Marcus Weber led Bravo team's planning session, his approach methodical and professional as he addressed the tactical challenges that Fiona's situation presented. Primary objective is convoy recovery, Weber announced to his assembled personnel. Secondary objective is intelligence gathering about enemy capabilities and intentions. The plan that emerged from Weber's briefing reflected standard military doctrine adapted to specific terrain conditions. Bravo team would approach using multiple routes to prevent enemy forces from concentrating defensive fire. Air support would provide covering fire during extraction. Artillery support would be available to suppress enemy positions that threatened rescue operations. But Fiona's unauthorized monitoring equipment was detecting enemy communications that revealed fatal flaws in conventional planning. The hostile forces had positioned additional units specifically to counter multi-axis approaches. Their concealed positions included anti-aircraft systems that would neutralize air support. Their defensive preparations had anticipated artillery support and included countermeasures that would minimize its effectiveness. Major Larson monitored the developing situation from Base Command, his confidence in conventional procedures reflecting institutional faith in established doctrine. Weber, what's your estimated time to reach the convoy? He asked, coordinating multiple elements through proven communication protocols. Sir, we'll be in position to begin rescue operations within 90 minutes. Weber replied, his timeline reflecting careful consideration of terrain challenges and tactical requirements, but 90 minutes represented a lifetime in tactical terms, especially when enemy forces were actively maneuvering to exploit time delays that conventional planning required. Fiona's real-time intelligence was showing hostile units repositioning to counter anticipated rescue attempts, creating tactical situations that would challenge even experienced combat personnel. The conventional response also involved requesting additional assets from higher command, including helicopter gunships and specialized reconnaissance teams that could provide capabilities beyond Forward Meridian's organic resources. The requests were properly formatted, transmitted through appropriate channels, and processed according to established procedures. Lieutenant Morrison coordinated intelligence support for rescue operations, her analysis based on official sources, supplemented by Fiona's field reports. Enemy strength estimated at company level, she briefed Weber's team. Positioned in defensive terrain with prepared positions and integrated fire support. The intelligence briefing was professional and comprehensive, providing tactical information that would be essential for mission planning. But it failed to capture the sophistication of enemy operations that Fiona's unauthorized analysis had revealed. Intelligence that wasn't reflected in official reports because her preparation methods weren't officially recognized as conventional. Response elements moved toward Fiona's position. Her enhanced monitoring equipment detected enemy communications that suggested hostile forces were prepared for exactly the type of rescue operation that military doctrine prescribed. Their positions, timing, and tactical coordination indicated extensive study of allied procedures and systematic development of countermeasures. The irony wasn't lost on Fiona that her months of unofficial preparation had equipped her with better intelligence about enemy capabilities than the official systems that were coordinating her rescue. Her comprehensive analysis had identified threat patterns that conventional intelligence had missed, but her warnings had been dismissed as inappropriate curiosity. Captain Weber's Bravo team made good time toward the contact area. Their movement, coordinated and professional as they approached tactical positions that would allow them to assess the situation and begin rescue operations. Their equipment was maintained to high standards, their training was current, and their motivation was excellent, but Fiona's tactical analysis suggested that conventional rescue attempts would result in casualties that could be avoided and mission failure that was preventable. The enemy forces had created a tactical situation that required unconventional solutions, exactly the type of comprehensive preparation that her superiors had discouraged. "Base Command, this is Jackson," she transmitted, knowing that her next communication would challenge established procedures and potentially end her military career. "Conventional approach will result in unacceptable casualties. I have alternatives that aren't reflected in standard doctrine." The pause that followed carried institutional weight as command personnel considered whether to authorize actions outside established parameters or maintain doctrinal purity despite tactical disadvantages. Major Larson's response reflected the dilemma that comprehensive preparation created for conventional command structures. "Jackson, maintain position and await rescue. Do not attempt independent action." But Fiona's analysis suggested that waiting for conventional rescue would result in strategic failure that extended beyond her individual situation. The enemy forces threatening her convoy were part of larger operations that would compromise Allied effectiveness throughout the region. Her unauthorized preparation had equipped her with capabilities to neutralize threats that conventional forces couldn't address effectively. The question was whether she'd be allowed to use skills that officially didn't exist, or whether institutional procedures would prevent tactical success. The first indication that something was wrong came through Fiona's unauthorized monitoring equipment at 0912 hours, 37 minutes into what should have been a routine supply run. Her modified communications array detected radio chatter on frequencies that weren't supposed to exist in the operational area. Encrypted transmissions suggesting coordinated movement by hostile forces. Fiona pulled over at a scenic overlook, ostensibly to check her cargo, but actually to analyze the intelligence her equipment was gathering. The official route briefing had declared the northern approach clear of enemy activity, but her enhanced surveillance capabilities were painting a different picture entirely. The enemy communications, she was intercepting suggested a sophisticated operation involving multiple units positioned along her route. The timing wasn't coincidental. Someone had known about today's supply run, had anticipated her departure time, and had positioned forces to intercept her at optimal choke points where conventional rescue would be impossible. Her personal intelligence files, compiled through months of careful analysis that her superiors had dismissed as inappropriate curiosity, contained references to similar operations. Enemy forces in the region had been developing tactics specifically designed to capture supply vehicles intact, acquiring both materials and intelligence while minimizing their own exposure to retaliation. Fiona activated her encrypted communication link to base, knowing that her unauthorized monitoring equipment would raise questions, but understanding that the intelligence was too critical to ignore. Major Larson's voice crackled through the static, immediately suspicious about how she'd acquired information that wasn't included in official intelligence reports. "Jackson, explain how you're receiving communications that aren't on your approved frequency list," Larson demanded, his tone carrying the authority of someone who'd finally found evidence of the inappropriate activities he'd been investigating. "Sir, I detected anomalous radioactivity and investigated using available equipment," Fiona replied, carefully avoiding specifics about her unauthorized modifications. "Multiple hostile units are positioned along my route. This is not a random encounter." The pause that followed suggested Larson was consulting with intelligence personnel, who were scrambling to verify information that their official systems had missed. Lieutenant Morrison's voice joined the conversation, her technical questions revealing that Fiona's intelligence was more comprehensive and accurate than anything Base Command had available. "Jackson, can you identify specific positions or unit strengths?" Morrison asked, her professional tone acknowledging the value of information while avoiding admission that official intelligence had been inadequate. Fiona consulted her annotated maps, cross-referencing radio signatures with terrain, analysis she'd conducted during months of systematic preparation. "Sir, I count at least 3 separate units. Primary force positioned at kilometer marker 23, blocking the main route. Secondary units flanking from elevated positions at grid references 347 to 891 and 352 to 897. They have the road under complete observation and crossfire." The intelligence she provided was detailed enough to confirm its accuracy, but raised uncomfortable questions about how a logistics specialist had acquired capabilities that exceeded those of trained reconnaissance personnel. Her months of comprehensive preparation were suddenly relevant, but in ways that highlighted the inadequacy of official planning. Major Larson's response revealed the command structure's dilemma. Fiona's unauthorized preparation had detected a threat that official intelligence had missed, but acknowledging her capabilities would validate the very activities they'd been trying to restrict. "Jackson, return to base immediately," Larson ordered. "We'll coordinate alternative delivery methods once we've confirmed the threat assessment." But Fiona's tactical analysis suggested that retreat might not be possible. The enemy positions were designed to control both forward and rear approaches, creating a kill zone that would eliminate any supply convoy regardless of direction. Her enhanced monitoring equipment was detecting movement patterns consistent with forces repositioning to block her withdrawal route. "Sir, enemy forces are moving to cut off my retreat," she reported, watching her tactical display update with new contact positions. "They've anticipated our response to their initial positioning. Standard evasion protocols won't be effective." The situation was evolving exactly as Fiona's unofficial threat assessments had predicted. Enemy forces had studied allied response patterns, developed countermeasures for conventional tactics, and positioned themselves to exploit weaknesses in standard military procedures. Her comprehensive preparation had identified these vulnerabilities months ago, but her warnings had been dismissed as inappropriate analysis, Lieutenant Morrison's voice carried new urgency, as Base Command realized the scope of their intelligence failure. "Jackson, we're coordinating rescue operations, but it will take time to organize adequate force. Can you maintain position and avoid contact?" Fiona studied her tactical situation with skills that officially didn't exist in her role but had been developed through systematic preparation her superiors had discouraged. The enemy position suggested they weren't interested in immediate engagement. They were waiting for something, possibly additional units or specific timing, that would maximize their operational success. Her analysis of cargo manifest revealed why this particular supply run had attracted sophisticated enemy attention. The medical supplies weren't just for routine healthcare. The ammunition quantities exceeded normal security requirements. The communications equipment included encrypted systems that would compromise Allied operations if captured. The enemy forces weren't just interdicting a supply convoy. They were executing a planned intelligence operation that would provide significant strategic advantages while eliminating Allied capabilities in the sector. The mission that Major Larson had characterized as routine was actually critical to Kofu regional operations. But Fiona's comprehensive preparation had equipped her with capabilities that enemy planning hadn't anticipated. Her additional training, unauthorized equipment, and systematic analysis had created options that weren't available to conventional logistics personnel. The same activities that had been criticized as inappropriate were suddenly essential for mission survival. "Sir," Fiona said quietly into her radio, understanding that her next words would define the rest of her military career, "I have capabilities that aren't reflected in standard personnel files. I can neutralize this threat, but it will require actions outside normal logistics protocols." The silence that followed carried the weight of months of official discouragement meeting operational necessity. Her dismissed preparation was about to be tested in circumstances that would prove whether comprehensive readiness was excessive ambition or essential capability. Major Larson's response would determine whether she'd be authorized to use skills that officially didn't exist or whether she'd be ordered to wait for conventional rescue that might arrive too late to prevent strategic disaster. But Fiona had already made her decision. The enemy forces had made a critical error in their planning. They'd positioned themselves to counter conventional military responses, but they hadn't anticipated facing someone whose preparation exceeded standard role definitions. The crisis had emerged exactly as her unauthorized analysis had predicted. Now it was time to discover what happened when comprehensive preparation met operational necessity. The formal review had been scheduled for 1400 hours on a Thursday afternoon. But Major Larson had kept Fiona waiting in the outer office for 20 minutes before calling her in. The delay was calculated, designed to reinforce the power dynamic and create anxiety that would make the subsequent questioning more effective. Fiona sat across from Larson's desk while he reviewed her personnel file with deliberate slowness. The office was arranged to intimidate, with military regulations posted on walls, commendation photographs featuring successful officers, and a clear sightline to rank insignia that emphasized the hierarchy she was supposedly challenging. "Specialist Jackson," Larson began, his voice carrying the formal tone reserved for disciplinary proceedings. "This review has been requested due to concerns about your focus and professional development. Several personnel have reported observations about your activities that suggest you may be losing sight of your assigned role." The phrasing was careful, legally defensible language that transformed months of whispered suspicion into official documentation. Fiona recognized the technique from her father's descriptions of military politics, the way informal complaints became formal charges without specific evidence or named accusers. "Sir, I'm not aware of any deficiencies in my performance," Fiona replied, maintaining the respectful tone required for official interactions, while internally preparing for the interrogation she knew was coming. Larson opened a folder containing what appeared to be incident reports and observational notes. Jackson, your technical performance has been satisfactory. But military service requires more than competence in assigned duties. It requires appropriate focus, respect for role boundaries, and integration with unit culture. The questioning began with seemingly neutral inquiries about her additional training activities. How much time did she spend studying materials beyond her specialty? Where did she acquire equipment that exceeded standard issue? Why did she maintain relationships with personnel outside her immediate chain of command? Each question was designed to make her defensive about activities that would be commendable in civilian contexts, but were being framed as problematic within military hierarchy. Fiona answered carefully, providing technical information without volunteering details that could be misinterpreted. Jackson, explain why you believe additional tactical training is necessary for a logistics specialist. Larson asked, his pen poised to record responses that would become part of her permanent record. Sir, comprehensive preparation enhances performance in any role, Fiona replied, using language from official training manuals. Understanding the broader operational context helps me perform my assigned duties more effectively. Larson's expression suggested dissatisfaction with her diplomatic response. Some would interpret your activities as preparation for roles you haven't been assigned and may never be qualified for. Are you dissatisfied with your current position? The question was a trap, requiring her to choose between appearing unambitious or admitting to aspirations that could be interpreted as criticism of her assignment process. Fiona had prepared for this moment, knowing that her comprehensive approach would eventually be questioned by administrators who viewed deviation from narrow role definitions as insubordination. Sir, I'm committed to serving in whatever capacity best serves the mission, she replied, a response that was technically accurate while avoiding the specific admissions that Larson was seeking. The questioning continued for 40 minutes, covering her equipment acquisitions, her information gathering methods, her relationships with intelligence personnel, and her private study habits. Each topic was approached from the perspective that her activities were potentially problematic rather than commendable. Lieutenant Morrison had been called in to provide context about Fiona's interactions with intelligence personnel. Her testimony was supportive but carefully limited to official interactions, avoiding mention of the informal consultations where Fiona had provided valuable insights that weren't reflected in standard reporting channels. Jackson has asked appropriate questions about threat assessments relevant to her logistics responsibilities, Morrison stated, her language precisely neutral. Her inquiries have been professional and within the scope of her security clearance. But Larson's follow-up questions revealed the true purpose of the review. Lieutenant, would you characterize Jackson's level of interest in intelligence matters as typical for logistics personnel? Morrison's hesitation was barely perceptible, but it provided the opening that Larson needed to establish that Fiona's approach was abnormal, even if it wasn't technically inappropriate. Her interest is more comprehensive than average, Morrison admitted reluctantly. The final phase of the questioning focused on Fiona's future intentions and willingness to modify her approach to align with command expectations. Larson presented 3 options. Accept additional supervision designed to keep her focused on assigned duties. Request transfer to a unit where her additional capabilities might be more appropriate, or commit to restricting her activities to standard logistics responsibilities. The ultimatum was clear despite its diplomatic phrasing. Conform to narrow role definitions or face consequences that would effectively end her military career progression. Fiona had anticipated this moment, understanding that her comprehensive preparation would eventually clash with administrative preferences for predictable mediocrity. Sir, I request the opportunity to demonstrate that my additional preparation enhances rather than detracts from my performance in assigned duties, she said, knowing that such a demonstration would never be officially authorized. Larson's response was final and unambiguous. Jackson, military effectiveness requires predictable performance within defined parameters. Your additional activities, while not technically improper, create uncertainty about your focus and priorities. I'm directing you to restrict your professional development to activities specifically related to logistics coordination. The meeting concluded with formal documentation that would follow Fiona throughout her military service. Her comprehensive preparation was officially characterized as excessive and potentially problematic. Her additional capabilities were redefined as evidence of poor judgment rather than valuable assets. As Fiona left Larson's office, she understood that the questioning had been more than administrative review. It had been a systematic effort to limit her development and force her into the narrow role that others had defined for her. Capabilities. The directive to restrict her activities would take effect immediately, but its practical impact would depend on circumstances beyond administrative control. Today's supply run to Checkpoint Bravo was routine according to official assessment, but Fiona's comprehensive preparation had detected indicators that suggested otherwise. The irony wasn't lost on her that the same preparation being officially discouraged might soon prove essential for mission success and unit survival. The whispers about Fiona's dedication had started subtly, spreading through the base like smoke through ventilation systems. What began as casual observations about her thorough preparation had evolved into something more insidious, a network of doubt that questioned not just her methods but her motivations. Private Marcus Chen had been the first to voice what others were thinking. During a maintenance shift 2 weeks earlier, he'd watched Fiona conduct her daily equipment inspection with characteristic thoroughness. Anyone else think it's weird how Jackson treats everything like it's life or death? He'd asked his fellow mechanics. I mean, it's just a supply truck. The comment had resonated with soldiers who'd grown tired of feeling inadequate compared to Fiona's standards. Corporal Petrov had expanded on the theme during mess hall conversations, his voice carrying just far enough to ensure Fiona could hear without being able to respond directly. Some people need to prove they're better than everyone else, Petrov had said, cutting his food with unnecessary force. Like doing the bare minimum isn't good enough for them. Makes you wonder what they're really trying to accomplish. The whispered doubts had found fertile ground among personnel who interpreted Fiona's comprehensive preparation as implicit criticism of their own more relaxed approach. Sergeant Vasquez had been particularly vocal during informal gatherings, her comments carefully crafted to sound like concerned leadership rather than personal criticism. I worry about soldiers who can't separate appropriate dedication from unhealthy obsession, Vasquez had told her circle of influence. Military service requires balance. When someone spends every free moment studying materials that aren't relevant to their actual job, it raises questions about their psychological state. The whispers had evolved to question Fiona's judgment and stability. Staff Sergeant Robert Kim had suggested that her additional training indicated poor understanding of military hierarchy. Soldiers who think they know better than they're assigned roles are dangerous, he'd said during a weapons maintenance session. They create confusion and undermine unit cohesion. The most damaging whispers questioned Fiona's loyalty and intentions. Private Elena Rodriguez had started rumors about Fiona's information gathering, her casual questioning of intelligence personnel, her interest in operational details beyond her clearance level. Why does a logistics specialist need to know about enemy movement patterns? Rodriguez had asked during guard duty rotations. Unless she's planning something that isn't official. The whispered doubts had created a feedback loop where Fiona's isolation increased her perceived strangeness, which justified additional exclusion, which reinforced the original suspicions. Lieutenant Morrison had tried to counter the narrative during officer meetings, but her defense had only intensified speculation about what Fiona might be concealing. Maybe Morrison sees something we don't, Corporal Petrov had suggested to his informal network. But when someone defends a soldier who won't stay in their lane, you have to wonder if there's information we're not getting. The whispers had reached Major Larson through multiple channels, creating pressure for him to address what was being framed as a potential security concern. His solution had been to limit Fiona's access to information beyond her immediate responsibilities, effectively confirming the suspicions that had motivated the original complaints. Jackson's curiosity about operational matters has been noted. Larson had announced during a leadership meeting that Fiona wasn't invited to attend. "We're implementing protocols to ensure all personnel focus on their assigned duties without unnecessary distractions." The new protocols had formalized Fiona's exclusion while providing official justification for the whispered doubts. Her comprehensive preparation was reframed as inappropriate information seeking. Her tactical knowledge was treated as evidence of security concerns. Her additional training was documented as failure to focus on assigned responsibilities. The whispers had personal costs that extended beyond professional marginalization. Fiona's attempts to build relationships with fellow soldiers were met with subtle resistance informed by rumors about her motivations. Simple conversations became interrogations where her questions were analyzed for hidden agendas rather than professional interest. Even her off-duty activities were scrutinized through the lens of whispered suspicions. When she exercised alone, it was interpreted as antisocial behavior. When she studied in her quarters, it was seen as obsessive preparation for unknown purposes. When she maintained her equipment to higher standards, it was viewed as showing off or compensating for inadequacy. The most insidious aspect of the whispered doubts was how they reframed Fiona's strengths as weaknesses. Her attention to detail became obsessive perfectionism. Her comprehensive knowledge became inappropriate curiosity. Her physical fitness became competitive showing off. Her tactical awareness became paranoid hypervigilance. The whispers had created an environment where Fiona couldn't win. Meeting minimum standards would confirm that her additional preparation was unnecessary. Exceeding standards reinforced suspicions about her motivations. Defending herself against rumors only provided evidence of the defensive behavior that the whispers had predicted. Master Sergeant Patricia Hayes, the base's senior enlisted advisor, had observed the situation with growing concern. During a private conversation with Major Larson, she'd attempted to address the toxic environment that the whispers had created. "Sir, the rumors about Jackson are affecting unit morale," Hayes had said carefully. "Some of our best soldiers are backing away from excellence because they don't want to be seen as showing off or having inappropriate ambitions." Larson's response had been dismissive. "Hayes, military units require cohesion. If Jackson's approach is creating tension, then she needs to modify her behavior to fit in better with her assigned role." The conversation had ended there, but Hayes had left with the understanding that the whispered doubts were now official policy rather than just informal gossip. Fiona's comprehensive preparation was a problem to be managed rather than an asset to be utilized. As Fiona drove through the Croatian countryside toward Checkpoint Bravo, she was unaware that the morning's mission briefing had generated additional whispers. Her questions about route security had been interpreted as excessive curiosity. Her equipment inspection had been seen as unnecessary showing off. Her professional demeanor had been analyzed for signs of the antisocial behavior that the rumors had predicted. The whispered doubts that had surrounded her for months were about to be tested by circumstances that would prove whether her comprehensive preparation was evidence of inappropriate ambition or essential capability. But the network of suspicion that had marginalized her would make it difficult for her achievements to be recognized even when they saved lives. The pattern of exclusion at Forward Meridian had begun during Fiona's second week of service, but it had taken months for her to fully understand how systematically she was being marginalized. Each missed opportunity had seemed isolated at first, but together they formed a clear picture of how the command structure viewed her potential contributions, The first significant exclusion had occurred during planning for Operation Clearwater, a complex resupply mission to multiple forward positions. Fiona had spent days analyzing the routes, identifying potential complications, and developing contingency plans that addressed various threat scenarios. Her analysis had been thorough, accounting for weather patterns, enemy activity reports, and terrain challenges that standard planning protocols often overlooked. When she'd submitted her recommendations through proper channels, Major Larson had acknowledged receipt with perfunctory politeness. But during the actual mission briefing, none of her suggestions were incorporated. Instead, the operation proceeded using standard templates that ignored several risk factors Fiona had identified. The mission succeeded, but required multiple course corrections that her analysis had predicted and addressed. After the operation, when Fiona had privately asked why her recommendations hadn't been considered, Larson's response had been revealing. "Jackson, your job is to execute plans, not create them. We have staff officers with appropriate training for operational planning. Your role is to support their decisions." The exclusion from planning wasn't limited to major operations. Even routine mission briefings became exercises in systematic dismissal. When convoy security was discussed, Fiona's input was politely ignored. When route selection was debated, her detailed terrain knowledge was deemed irrelevant. When equipment requirements were assessed, her comprehensive understanding of field conditions was overlooked. The pattern extended to training opportunities that could have enhanced her official capabilities. When advanced logistics courses were offered, Fiona's applications were approved for basic sessions, but denied for leadership or tactical modules. When cross-training opportunities arose with other specialties, she was consistently assigned to support roles rather than participant positions. The exclusion became more pointed during personnel selection for special assignments. 3 times in 2 months, missions had required logistics specialists with additional capabilities beyond standard supply coordination. Each time, Fiona had volunteered and been passed over in favor of soldiers with inferior technical qualifications, but better relationships with the command structure. The most frustrating exclusion had occurred during preparation for a joint operation with Croatian Special Forces. The mission required a logistics coordinator who could interface with foreign military protocols and adapt to non-standard operational requirements. Fiona's language skills, cultural knowledge, and tactical flexibility made her an obvious choice, but she wasn't even considered for the assignment. Instead, Corporal Petrov had been selected despite having no relevant language capabilities and minimal experience with international operations. When the mission encountered complications that required exactly the skills Fiona possessed, the operation was delayed while additional personnel were brought in to address gaps that her inclusion would have prevented. The social exclusion paralleled the professional marginalization. Informal planning sessions that occurred during off-duty hours never included her. When other logistics personnel gathered to discuss operational challenges or share experiences, conversations would pause when she approached, then resume after she passed. The message was clear. Her comprehensive approach to military service made others uncomfortable. Even her attempts to contribute through unofficial channels were systematically discouraged. When she'd identified discrepancies in supply manifests that suggested security vulnerabilities, her report was filed without investigation. When she'd noticed patterns in requisition requests that indicated potential operational security breaches, her concerns were dismissed as overanalysis. The exclusion had personal costs that extended beyond professional frustration. Fiona found herself increasingly isolated from the social networks that made military service bearable. Mealtimes became solitary affairs. Recreation activities proceeded without invitations that never came. Even casual conversations became awkward. Interactions where her knowledge and preparation were treated as unwelcome intrusions. The most painful aspect of the exclusion was its impact on mission effectiveness. Fiona could see problems that others missed, identify solutions that standard procedures overlooked, and contribute capabilities that would enhance unit performance. But her insights were consistently dismissed. Her skills were systematically underutilized, and her preparation was treated as evidence of inappropriate ambition rather than professional dedication. Lieutenant Sarah Morrison, the base's intelligence officer, had been one of the few personnel who'd recognized Fiona's potential contributions. During a private conversation 3 weeks earlier, Morrison had expressed frustration with the command structure's rigid thinking. "You have skills that this unit needs," Morrison had said quietly, ensuring their conversation wouldn't be overheard. "But the leadership here can't see past role definitions. They're so focused on maintaining hierarchy that they're missing opportunities to improve performance." Morrison's assessment had been accurate, but hadn't translated into changed policies. The exclusion continued, reinforced by a command culture that valued conformity over capability and preferred predictable mediocrity to exceptional preparation. As Fiona drove toward Checkpoint Bravo, she reflected on the months of systematic exclusion that had defined her service experience. Every missed opportunity, every dismissed suggestion, every informal conversation that had paused when she approached. The pattern was clear. Her comprehensive preparation and tactical knowledge were seen as threats to established hierarchy rather than assets to be utilized. The irony was that today's mission, supposedly routine supply delivery, was about to demonstrate exactly why her excluded capabilities were essential rather than excessive. The dismissive attitude that had marginalized her for months was about to be tested by circumstances that would require every skill she'd developed and every piece of preparation she'd accumulated. But as far as her superiors knew, they were sending Logistics Jackson on a simple delivery run through secure territory. They had no idea they were about to discover what happened when comprehensive preparation met operational necessity. The 20-minute drive to the Croatian countryside gave Fiona time to review what others didn't know about her preparation. While her fellow soldiers saw only a logistics specialist who took her job too seriously, the reality was far more complex. For months, she'd been developing capabilities that went well beyond supply coordination, driven by an instinct that her current role was temporary preparation for something more demanding. Every evening after official duties, Fiona retreated to a secluded area behind the base's maintenance facilities where she practiced skills that weren't part of any logistics manual. Using equipment she'd carefully acquired through personal channels, she maintained proficiency in advanced marksmanship, close-quarters combat, and tactical reconnaissance. Her father's SAS training had given her a foundation, but she'd built upon it with methodical dedication. The precision rifle concealed among her supplies wasn't standard issue for logistics personnel. She'd obtained it through a complex series of trades with departing special operations soldiers, offering maintenance services and rare personal items in exchange for equipment that would normally be restricted to combat specialists. The weapon was maintained to competition standards, its optics zeroed for distances that supply drivers would never encounter in normal operations. Her tactical knowledge extended far beyond what military databases contained. Fiona had cultivated relationships with intelligence analysts, using casual conversations and small favors to gain access to information that painted a more complete picture of regional threats. She knew about enemy movement patterns that weren't included in standard briefings, understood the tactical significance of terrain features that others saw as mere geography, and had mapped potential infiltration routes that conventional planning overlooked. The personal equipment hidden throughout her gear represented months of careful acquisition. Advanced night vision optics acquired from a retiring reconnaissance specialist. Communications equipment purchased through civilian channels, but modified for military frequencies. Specialized ammunition loaded to match her rifle's specific characteristics. emergency medical supplies beyond standard field dressing kits. What made her preparation truly comprehensive was its systematic nature. Fiona didn't just collect equipment or memorize procedures. She practiced integrated scenarios that combined multiple skills under stress conditions. During her off-duty hours, she ran tactical exercises that tested her ability to transition between roles, moving from defensive positions to offensive operations to emergency medical treatment. That her physical conditioning went far beyond military fitness standards. While other soldiers maintained adequate fitness for their assigned roles, Fiona trained like someone preparing for special operations selection. Her cardiovascular endurance, strength-to-weight ratio, and recovery time all exceeded what would be expected from a logistics specialist. She could carry heavy loads over extended distances, operate effectively with minimal sleep, and maintain fine motor skills under physical stress. The intelligence files she'd studied in her personal time revealed patterns that official briefings missed. Enemy forces in the region weren't randomly distributed. Their positions suggested a coordinated strategy designed to disrupt supply lines while avoiding direct confrontation with heavily armed patrols. The northern route she was currently traveling had been probed repeatedly over the past 2 weeks, with surveillance activity increasing each day. Fiona's route analysis went beyond what GPS navigation provided. She'd memorized elevation changes, choke points, escape routes, and concealment opportunities along every road within 50 kilometers of the base. Her personal maps contained annotations about civilian population centers, infrastructure vulnerabilities, and historical sites that could provide tactical advantages or complications. The medical supplies in her cargo weren't just inventory items to be delivered. Fiona understood their tactical implications, knew which items indicated preparation for specific types of casualties, and could recognize patterns that suggested anticipated combat operations. Today's shipment included an unusual quantity of trauma supplies and emergency surgical equipment, suggesting that Checkpoint Bravo was expecting something more significant than routine patrol injuries. Her communications equipment was configured for frequencies beyond standard logistics channels. While maintaining proper protocol on official nets, Fiona monitored intelligence channels that provided real-time updates on enemy activity. The quiet chatter she'd been hearing all morning suggested increased movement in sectors adjacent to her route, information that hadn't been included in her official briefing. The weapon maintenance routine she followed would have impressed armory personnel. Her personal sidearm was cleaned and inspected daily, its ammunition rotated to prevent degradation, its holster modified for faster draw times. The rifle concealed in her supplies had been test-fired weekly, its point of impact confirmed at multiple ranges, its reliability verified under various environmental conditions. What her supervisors dismissed as inappropriate preparation was actually a comprehensive training program designed to bridge the gap between her assigned role and the capabilities she might need in an unpredictable operational environment. Every skill she'd developed, every piece of equipment she'd acquired, every hour of additional training had been motivated by a single principle: be ready for what others can't imagine. As the supply truck continued down the dusty road toward Checkpoint Bravo, Fiona's preparation felt less like unnecessary overreach and more like prudent insurance. The morning sun was bright, the countryside appeared peaceful, and according to official intelligence, the route was secure. But Fiona's additional monitoring equipment was detecting radio signatures that suggested otherwise. Her enhanced situational awareness was noting subtle indicators that the official briefing had missed. Her comprehensive preparation was about to be tested in ways that would prove whether her superior's dismissive attitude was justified or dangerously naive. The dashboard clock showed 0845 hours, and she was making good time toward the checkpoint. Everything appeared routine, exactly as Major Larson had predicted. But Fiona's instincts, sharpened by months of systematic preparation, that others had dismissed as inappropriate ambition, were suggesting that this particular supply run was about to become something entirely different. The supply truck rumbled down the dusty Croatian road at 0730 hours on what should have been the most routine mission of Fiona Jackson's military career. By sunset that same day, she would single-handedly eliminate an entire enemy outpost that had been terrorizing Allied forces for months. But as she gripped the steering wheel and squinted against the morning sun streaming through her windshield, the 23-year-old logistics specialist had no idea that her superiors' dismissive attitude toward her unconventional training would soon become their salvation. The morning briefing at Forward Operating Base Meridian had lasted exactly 12 minutes, but Fiona Jackson had been preparing for it since dawn. She stood near the back of the operations tent, her notebook filled with detailed route analysis and contingency plans that no one had asked for. And no one would read. At barely 5 feet 4 inches with auburn hair pulled back in regulation style, Fiona possessed an intensity that made some of her fellow soldiers uncomfortable. While others saw supply runs as mundane transportation duties, she approached each mission like a complex tactical operation. Her maps were annotated with elevation changes, choke points, alternative routes, and detailed intelligence about recent enemy activity patterns. Major Henrik Larsson addressed the assembled personnel with his characteristic efficiency. "Standard resupply to Checkpoint Bravo," he announced, gesturing to the digital map display. "Medical supplies, ammunition, and field rations. Specialist Jackson, you'll take the northern route. Should be a quiet run." Fiona raised her hand. "Sir, intelligence reports suggest increased enemy movement along the northern approach. I've identified 3 alternative routes that might be safer." She pulled out her annotated maps, the product of weeks of careful study. Larsson's expression shifted from neutral to mildly irritated. "Jackson, it's a supply run, not an invasion. Stick to the designated route and focus on your actual job." Around her, Fiona caught the familiar exchanges of glances. Corporal Dmitry Petrov leaned towards Sergeant Elena Vasquez. "There she goes again with the tactical analysis," he whispered, not quite quietly enough. "It's like she thinks she's special." "Forces instead of logistics," Vasquez nodded. "Someone should tell her that driving supplies doesn't require a PhD in military strategy." Fiona pretended not to hear, but the words stung with familiar precision. For 8 months at Forward Meridian, she'd endured variations of the same dismissal. Her comprehensive preparation was seen as overcompensation. Her detailed knowledge of local terrain was considered unnecessary. Her suggestions during briefings were politely ignored or openly dismissed. The truth was that Fiona had been preparing for more than supply runs since her first day at the base. While her official military occupational specialty was logistics coordination, she'd spent her off-duty hours developing skills that had nothing to do with inventory management. Every evening after completing her assigned duties, she studied advanced tactical manuals, practiced marksmanship with borrowed weapons, and analyzed enemy movement patterns from intelligence reports she wasn't supposed to have access to. Her background made her an anomaly at the base. Unlike most logistics personnel who'd trained specifically for supply chain management, Fiona had originally enlisted for combat roles. Her scores in weapons training, tactical assessment, and physical fitness had been exceptional. But a bureaucratic error during processing had landed her in logistics, and by the time the mistake was discovered, her unit desperately needed experienced supply coordinators. She'd accepted the assignment with outward grace, but privately continued developing the skills she'd originally trained for. Her personal weapons were maintained to Special Forces standards. Her physical fitness regime exceeded requirements for her assigned role. She'd even acquired specialized equipment through careful trading and personal purchases, gear that would seem excessive for someone whose job was supposedly limited to driving trucks and counting supplies. What her fellow soldiers didn't know was that Fiona had grown up in rural Scotland, where her father had been a decorated SAS veteran. Long before she'd enlisted, he'd taught her advanced reconnaissance, close-quarters combat, and tactical thinking. Her childhood had been an informal apprenticeship in military arts that went far beyond anything taught in standard basic training. But at Forward Meridian, none of that mattered. She was Logistics Jackson, the over-prepared supply driver who took her job too seriously and had opinions above her station. The irony wasn't lost on her that her comprehensive preparation was seen as a character flaw rather than professional dedication. After the briefing, Fiona walked to the motor pool to inspect her assigned vehicle. The truck was standard issue. Reliable but unarmored, designed for routine supply runs through supposedly secure territory. She conducted her pre-mission inspection with the same thoroughness that had earned her both respect and eye rolls from maintenance personnel. "You know, that truck's been serviced 3 times this week," called out mechanic Torres from across the garage. "It's not going to break down just because you're driving it." Fiona continued her inspection, checking tire pressure, fluid levels, and communications equipment. "Preparation prevents problems," she replied, running through her mental checklist. Torres shook his head with amusement. "Jackson, you inspect that truck like you're expecting to drive through a war zone." If only he knew, Fiona thought, how much she hoped he was wrong. As she loaded the supplies, Fiona's mind automatically cataloged the contents. Medical supplies for treating combat wounds, ammunition for defensive operations, and enough field rations to sustain a squad for 2 weeks. Standard resupply, according to Major Larson, but the quantity suggested that Checkpoint Bravo was expecting something more than routine patrols. Her personal gear was loaded alongside the official cargo, carefully concealed among legitimate supplies. Advanced optics, specialized ammunition, tactical communications equipment, and a precision rifle she'd acquired through channels that weren't entirely official. To anyone conducting a casual inspection, it would appear to be standard security. Equipment for a supply driver operating in hostile territory.